In tonight's Midnight Machine Shop video, we're going to cover installation of backup lights and the license plate frame and light. Items needed to get your Humvee compliant to get back on the road. The M1035A2 Ambulance has reverse lights. Now, these came right from the vendor with the wire harnesses. However, it came with this one for the ground side. And I don't have the 1035 wire harness on a 1097A2 truck. So what I did is I just made a extension wire and I'm going to connect over to the marker light ground. And since I'm not going to be taking these on and off, it's no big deal. I can just bolt it and unbolt it. The 24 volt DC power, which comes from the switch on the shifter, this side I'll have to run new wire for. In looking at pictures online, I can see that the light lined up approximately there on the outside rivet, and the upper bolt was in line to give it enough clearance for the structure behind. Put the transfer punch in. Punch didn't move, the light did. I'm going to drill a pilot hole. Now that the pilot hole's in place, I'll follow it up with a 5/16 drill. Before I drill the other holes, I'm going to put the light in place. That way I can use the light as a guide. Using the transfer punch, mark and then drill the remaining 3 bolt holes and put the bolts in. And then the light on the driver's side goes the exact same way. For wiring in the reverse lights, I got this harness I made. It's just a wire that comes in splits, and I've got one side that's long that runs to the passenger side, and then this side that runs to the driver's side. The point where I'm going to start the harness for the reverse lights is right here where the factory harness splits. So I'm going to lay my wiring on top of this and follow all these P-clamps all the way through. I'm just going to keep working the wire back through each P-clamp. With the length of the wire double checked, I'm going to put the terminal on. So these are not the right crimping tool, but it's the crimping tool I have. With these terminals, it's always good to put the black sleeve on, the white sleeve on, then crimp the terminal. That if you don't do it in that order, there's no way to fix it. So then this just slides down like so. And then just make the connection on the reverse light. The main wiring runs down on the outside of the frame rail between the body, and it runs all the way forward. And then you can see under here is the emergency brake, and then the shifter assemblies right up here. So that's where we're going with our wire. Between the body and the frame, there's actually these hooks that the wiring is run through. Don't even have to unbolt it, you can just fish it through with no terminal on the end. So don't terminate the wire until you get the wire run. So to get the shifter out to put the switch in, there's 3 wires on a standard shifter. There's 2 for the neutral safety switch, and then 1 that comes off for basically the shift indicator lights. With the wires disconnected, the next thing to do is the cotter pins that hold the shift levers. So that's the first one, and just move it to the side. And that's the second one, I just set it to the side. So don't turn these, leave them where they were. By rotating them, it changes where they are on the rod, and it changes your basically shift position. So I'm going to try to not interfere with them. So the front 2 bolts can be removed from a wrench under the doghouse. These 2, you might need a second person, so that's what I did. One person to just hold the wrench, and the other underneath to operate the impact gun. And then the shifter just lifts out. First thing we got to do is remove the dust boot, and that just slides off the 2 shift levers, and we'll have to feed the wiring through the hole in the side. So it is a bit of a tight fit. It's meant to keep dirt and all the other stuff out. So this is what the inside of the shifter looks like. After putting the shifter into reverse, coming over here to the inside, you can see where the holes are for mounting the switch, and then the slot for mounting the little bar that actually interfaces with the switch. The detent install is by sliding a washer in. It's just a 5/16 washer, and then the detent goes in onto it. I'm going to put a tiny amount of Loctite on there, and then the nut goes on. So before I put the switch in, there's one more thing I wanted to note. The switch mounts on these 2 holes right here, but it's angled this way. Now, I looked at a bunch of other switches, like GM reverse light switches and everything else, and I can find ones that fit the aluminum mounting block, which is similar to the one that the neutral safety switch mounts on. I can find the right threads, but they're just too long. They hit this center shaft that all the shifter linkages rotate around, and it's not going to work. So some of them are even had like weather pack connectors, which are just too big. It looks like the answer is the actual reverse light switch from military surplus or AM General or whoever. The switch itself installs on this little switch block. You don't actually have to use Loctite or anything on this switch, because when it's installed, the flat of the switch lines up with this flat, which mounts against the back side of this. So all that will keep it locked into place like so. Switch slides into place with the wires going inward, and then you kind of line up the hole, and then there's screws with star washers on them to keep it in place. Put new zip ties back in place to hold all the wires in the slot here on the side. After cleaning off the shift boot, I can now put the wiring back through the pass-through on the boot, and just kind of keep pushing them through in order. They'll go. The next step is to get the shifter arms back through their respective holes, which that's fairly straightforward. One modification to do while the shifter is out is to put in riv nuts on the 4 holes. That way, one doesn't have to have 2 people to ever take the shifter back out. With the hole enlarged ever so slightly, you just put it on the riv nut tool and then compress it. And then unthread the tool, and now you have a permanent nut in the aluminum panel that the bolt just drops right into and will thread. And now you don't have to go underneath with the wrench. Now the shifter can go back in. Being careful to get the wires in. And just dropping it into place here. And then a matter of moving the rubber pad back so that the boot can go underneath it. With the rivet nuts in place, this makes this super easy. That I can just thread the bolts in from the top, and I don't have to worry about having to go underneath to hold the wrench. Now to reconnect all the wires. So they only kind of go one way. The new wires are easy to tell from the old ones. That kind of makes things simple. Now the question is where to get power to run the lights. And it's in a weird spot. It's the horn. Removing the main light switch as well as the turn signal switch from the steering column, we can take a better look at these wires. So right here is wire 467, and it's only on when the main light switch is on stop lamp or service drive. Power from here goes to the turn signals, which are only on in those positions, and the horn. So on an ambulance, there would be another wire connecting in here, which would actually be running back to the reverse light switch or the backup lamp switch that's on the shifter. To take advantage of this, what we're going to do is build a splitter with a male terminal that connects to the harness on the truck and a female terminal that connects to the plug on the horn. And that splitter is going to run to a wire that's going to run out here, and then just follow the wire all the way down the frame rail back to the switch on the shifter. And that'll give us power for the reverse lights. Shifter's in reverse, and I've got both lights on. This is a win. So to get this thing back on the road, it needs a license plate. And there's plenty of license plate brackets available, but I didn't like any of them. So I designed my own. I drew it up in CAD, they laser cut it, bent it, powder coated it, and then all I had to do is assemble the light and the wire. And then going back together, I'll just feed the wires up through there, get the bolt in, And then the license plate is offset forward to clear the bolt heads. And then it'll sit underneath the reverse light, which will protect it. So if I'm going to step up on here, I'm not going to step on this or anything. And with the way the bracket's designed, the bottom of the license plate sits no lower than the bottom of the airlift bumper. So it won't get caught on anything underneath. And then the same is true with the light. The light sits essentially flush with the top of the airlift bumper. I'm going to pull power from this marker light. Using 2 pieces of wire and a connector kit, it's easy enough to make a splitter to power the license plate light. And then just reinstall it into the connection that I took apart earlier. Got the lights on, license plate lights working, reverse lights are working. Put it back in park. Now reverse lights are off and license plate lights still on. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.